And there's one more thing that we have here is we have the controller. So let's look at our earlier case. Do we have a controller? No, we didn't have any control in our example, but now we have an option here that you can add the controller. So controller was an option, and we are now associating this particular state to a controller. Okay, so just a new attribute that you found, and now we have several states. You see that you have app and state, app.search and app.browser. Well, I need to make it clear that this is just a name. Okay, that dot is not the JSON dot notification to get the element out of it. It's just a name. It is inside a single code. So there's no way it can be a way of accessing a particular variable or property of a JSON data. So don't get confused with that. It's just the name. So because of the state provider availability, we can now use the state provider and register the app's state with these objects. We do that for all the states in our app. And finally, we have URL router provider dot otherwise. Where did we get this URL router provider? We are getting it because we are passing this URL router provider. Now this can be used as a savior just in case your app doesn't match to any of these states. Then this is your default state. So that's what happens when the app loads. The default state is the playlist, right? You see the playlist.html. So this is the default one, right? That's the /app you fall into, /app/playlist. That's the URL for this, and this playlist is loaded, the playlist.html. Let's look at the playlist.html, and it takes in a JSON object. Okay, that means we have a playlist title. Let's go ahead, and where does it get this playlist title? We can now go ahead and dig into some data here. Let's look at lib. No, not in lib. Inside www, where is the data? Not in this. Not in bower.json. No. So there should be some data here, right? Okay, I think I should look into the code of playlist. Let's look at the playlist.html, and it gets the playlist ID, and then you do that. So playlists, okay, so there is a playlist array. Where is the playlist array? Let's look at controller. Does it have any playlist? Here. So in the playlist controller, you have actually the playlist array, and now you're looping through it. So let me go back to my playlist HTML. Okay, it is an ng repeat of playlist. So in my controller, where is the corresponding controller for that? Somewhere here. Okay, now we need to talk about controller as well. I told you that index.html, we are not having the ng controller. So how is this whole app being having a controller? So let's look at this. We'll go to the app definition. At this point, I have a gym app, and then this is the name of a module, right? Just like an Ionic, this is the name of a module, but the name is indicating me that it is a controller. Again, don't be of the opinion that this dot is the JSON way of accessing the data. No, it's just a name, and it helps you to understand that it is a starter.controller. So it's just a name of a module. Now this app is dependent on another module. Where is that module? Right? Let's look at this one. Here I find that the name of this module, just like you created an angular.module and give it a name and the dependency, you are now creating a controller module, and that's no different from creating a regular module for an app, right? So I'm creating another module and I'm giving it a name. So let's not keep it like starter.controller. I'll say GYM, and I'll give it a capital C controllers. Okay, now it's plural, just for our understanding. It has nothing to do with JavaScript. And in app.js, I'll go ahead and I'll say that this is gym, and this is controllers, right? I've saved it here and also in the controllers. So I have a controller module itself, and that's the reason I don't have to inject a controller. The controller is in fact being invoked by the normal, the basic app. The ng app attribute uses gym app, which is dependent on the gym controllers, and here you have the gym controller, right? So you don't have to inject it using ng controller. You just make a separate module of gym controller. Now this module has several controllers. You look at this, it has several controllers. The first one is app controller, and then again we are using method chaining. You see, I'm not putting a semicolon and continuing with it. I'm using a method chaining. So when this first function gets completed, right, I have the second one, and I'm not putting a semicolon here. So I'm having another controller called playlist controller, right? And that is extra S here. I just have a playlist controller without that extra S, right? So now I have 3 controllers currently, and I can have actually more than any number of controllers I can put in, and I make a module of that and plug it inside my app.js. To summarize, in the index.html we see an ng app with a gym app, and we don't have ng controller. Ion navigation view is similar to the UI view that you have here in your index.html, right? So effectively the entire application is actually having index.html. We never move out of index.html because everything else gets plugged into here, and that's the reason you have these files defined only in index.html. If you look at the templates, we only have the views here, right? We don't have the complete head and the link to the JavaScript, because it is always the index.html that is active. So what we can also understand is that these views are like UI view, which gets plugged in into your index.html at this point. So when a page loads, this page loads, the default index.html is loaded, and then we go ahead and look into what is the default page that needs to be loaded. So we go to app.js, and you see we have different states, and then URL router provider says that this is the default one, right? If you have not clicked on any active state, this is the default state. So you go to app playlists. So I have this playlists.html, and this is loaded. When this is loaded, it's corresponding controller. So if I go to app playlist, what is the corresponding controller for the app playlist? It is a playlist controller.js. So I go to controllers module, okay? It's a module now. And I look at, do you have a playlists controller? Yes, you have. And there is an array of objects. So these objects are looped through, and that's what you get in your index.html. It is looped through because you have an ng repeat here, right? It loops through that, and you take each item, put into the Ionic item, just like the list item, and it is displayed on index.html. If the state changes, so in my app, if I have the state changing, right, I move on to say another state, okay, and say for example in the browse, I just see the browse content, right? I just see the browse option. So that's the summary. That's how the entire navigation works here. Now in the next video we will try to create a few buttons using cards of Ionic.